I got a letter back from him afterwards, and it began, "My dear child in Christ." I went on to say that he was a bishop, he would no longer be associating with nuns like me. Signed name. At the end there was a pass that says, "What's this bullshit about power corrupt?" I might give him at the end of this 2.5 minutes to respond. This whole bit. I think the way I got it, we're going to 10:30, right? 10:15. Let's see. Okay. You have now down to a minute. I'm leaving during that minute. I'm supposed to talk about the ministry and the future, and so on. Doing it, start to over the years, now and then I pick up literature by these people they call futurologists, and try to up a few of the trends that finds there. I've been able to do a few of them, and all I've done is some of those trends and try to see what they might mean for us. I think when we're talking about the future from a theological viewpoint, we have to start with the notion that the future is essentially unknowable. It's one of my own mentor Karl Rahner's notions. The future is essentially unknowable, and that's extremely important to us as we venture into that future. What the futurologists do is try to pick up trends from the present and project them into the future. It's not a science by any means. Some of them seem to be better at it than others, however. One of the things that talking about the future does is sort of raises for us hopes and anxieties as well. If we had more time, I guess one of the things I would do is to invite you to write down some of those hopes for the future and fears that go along with it. In fact, I had intended to do that, but time constrictions here, I think we will allow that to happen in some other setting. The other thing that futurologists do is they divide their material up into descriptive and prescriptive things. So one thing they do is try to describe how they think it's going to be. The other option you have is to say how you would like it to be, what your dreams are, and what it should be like as one moves into the future. I suppose that one of the things that happens to us as ministers is that we don't get a lot of time to dream about the future. The press of daily activities and all of the pressures of the ministry and so on, it seems like such an ad hoc kind of thing, and we're constantly under pressure to respond, and we don't get around very often to think in these longer terms and where we want to be 5 years from now, or what the church is going to be like, and so on. So maybe this kind of opportunity is good for us in that way. And finally, in sort of preliminary remarks, I think that for us, we bring a faith dimension to futurology. I mean, for us, we believe that God is with us throughout history, that history will achieve its final fulfillment, that the direction is set, and the seeds of the victory are planted with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So apart from failures and apart from loss of numbers, and despite all of those kind of things, that our sense is that it's going someplace, it's going to get there, and that's, I think, what ultimately grounds our hope. Now, I want to pick out, I've got about 10 of these trends here, I suppose, and we'll try to pick out from those ones that we can manage in the time frame and so on. The first thing that I would see is the continuing ambivalence in the American psyche about community. You know, in Megatrends, which is sort of a popularized version of all this futurology, I think the real futurologists are ambivalent about that book, some good things, some bad, but remember that second trend he talked about, there would be this high-tech, high-touch trend. What he meant by that was that the technology would continue to grow, the computerized world would be upon us, we'd be dealing more and more with people on an impersonal kind of basis, and that would in turn produce high-touch interest. That is his word for I would call community, face-to-face kind of interactions with other individuals. Well, part of my sense is that all of this talk of community really needs to be parsed out more carefully. Because I think if we look at our people, and ourselves included, and the American culture as a whole, we find a real ambivalence about community. True, some people are looking for it. The high-tech world does say, I want more face-to-face relationships. I want to be known by my name. I want to be able to spill my guts to some people. I want to be able to interact in this close, familiar way. I want more intimacy in my life, and so on. On the other hand, it seems that many people in the culture are sated with community. They got it up to here. They got all the community they want. I mean, they're living in a family where they're constantly having calls made upon their time and energy. You know, they're in this bowling league and they go and party with those people. They have close relationships with some of the people they work with and so on. So when you begin to look at the culture, the pure thing that many of ministers have been working on, that there's this unalloyed sort of drive for community that we can build on, I think is simply wrong. We have to be in touch with the fact that there's two things going on. In the culture, the cowboy image remains large and powerful. The Marlboro Man is still a big symbol of what a lot of people are looking for. They want this individualism, they want a privatizing of life, and they're not there hungering for community at all. There's something else going on. I think especially maybe in the males in the culture, this sense of independence, being apart from, sit in the back of church, don't get too involved, and so on. Okay, now, what are we going to say about all of this, perhaps from a theological viewpoint and then a pastoral kind of response? Well, theologically, one of the things that we need to do is to make sure we're trying to come up with an indigenous theology. You know, by and large, we've still been borrowing our theology. Still, much of the stuff I read seems to be out of touch with real life. It's not tapping the experience of people. It's mentioned that I'm writing this pastoral letter for the bishops on campus ministry, and this is one of the themes that we're playing with, and a great deal of opposition comes up. In fact, I think, where's this going to be shown? Why are you videotaping? Anyway, I mean, the opposition, I mean, one bishop quit the committee, I think, on, don't show this on the East Coast. But over this question, I mean, I'm trying to work out this sort of inductive ecclesiology. That is, try to look at the experience of campus ministers around the country and find out what's going on instead of saying what ought to be going on to start with. And there's a lot of objection to that. And there's a lot of academic theologians who still don't want to take seriously the experience here in the United States. Theologically as well, it seems we need a lot of effort at what I would like to call practical theology. That is an attempt to analyze the culture from the viewpoint of our real pastoral problems, but to bring the best scientific expertise we can bring together on that kind of question. Of course, part of this is to make sure that we relativize the institutional model, and I choose my word carefully there. I mean, we got two things going. I mean, some people still, want a clerical caste system. See it yet in our seminaries when I give talks there, that people are very upset with a lot of the trends. They want to be back in the clerical caste and that kind of mold. On the other hand, we got people who say the institutional model makes no sense at all, don't talk about it, it's all a community model. I use the word, I think we ought to relativize that model. It remains vitally important, as I'll see in another section of my talk here, about rootedness, about order in the midst of chaos, about hanging together in the midst of a complex and changing world. So I think we have to relativize that institutional model. Now, pastorally, I mean, what does this kind of thing mean? To play with my ambivalence for a moment, one is that we have to try to provide a sense of community for our people, for those who are looking for it, obviously. Means what? Breaking down large parishes into smaller units, trying to look for ways in which we can gather people around an interest. trying to get maybe natural groupings. I think it's something that Dick and I did at Dick Wurzel and I did when we were together at Bowling Green. We tried to look for the natural communities and then plug them in, like get a sorority to take over our 1:15 Mass, or bring one of the athletic teams in to participate in that liturgy. So they've already got that community formed there, and what you're trying to do is to highlight it, to give it a deeper dimension in some way. So maybe part of this is to look at given communities we already have existing, seeing how we can plug them into what we're doing. On the other hand, there's creation of community, trying to find people who will rally around a given interest or activity. Maybe all of the musicians in the parish be some part of a community. We used to, again, thinking back to our experience at Bowling Green, where all of our musicians used to practice together once a week, and then we'd have brunch after one of the Mass. And relationship formed, some good marriages out of that. They used to pray together periodically. But there's an interest group they're able to touch and build on, it seems to me. On the other hand, I think we got to avoid being strained in dealing with those who aren't interest community. I think we're in danger of ecclesiology, those of us who within this system, of make church be a be-all and end-all. Church, not the kingdom. Vital part of theological understanding and scriptural studies. The church is not the kingdom. It is sign and instrument of the kingdom, as the council says. And I think we've got to be careful of thinking that everyone's plugged into that community, or that everyone to be on a committee, or people got to be very involved in what we're doing. And I think what happens is a frustration come up over that, or sort of a thing of personal attack, like these guys leave early, or they sit back, or they don't participate, or they don't involve in any of our various activities. And I think one of the things you need to remember about all of that is there's many ways of serving the kingdom, and that there is this individualistic strain, and that some of these people are sated with community, and we just simply make them feel more guilty when we're trying to push, like everyone's got to be involved. You know, we have to ask, why does everyone have to be involved? There's a lot of ways of serving the kingdom. Maybe a person who's feeling guilty there is working for the Red Cross and doing a great job, raising kids, so on. I remember the other day being standing back at church, and our people notoriously come in late. We've been fighting it now for a year and a half and can't seem to get any place. There's this woman coming in about 22 minutes after the Mass has started, and I'm standing back, and I can feel that inside, what the hell, why is it? And I looked at her face, and I read something quickly, and trailing behind her was a 15-year-old daughter with the most sullen look I've ever seen, and a 10-year-old, and the scene flashed in my mind. She's home. Come on, get ready, get here, and well, that softened my heart, and instead of saying, "Why are you late again?" I just gave her a hug and took her to a seat. I felt that intuitive response was probably better than saying you're late again. So, as part of that ambivalence about community, the woman's probably involved in 100 other things and so on. And I think we have to be careful of that. I suppose that what comes out of all of this is part of the way we interact with others around, and I think you've gotten a lot of this week. The whole team ministry thing in the future I think is going to be bigger. We're going to be trying to draw more people into this ministry. I'm trying to develop a model of the church out of this type of experience that one would call a community of ministers. Dulles has moved beyond his 5 models by now talking about a community of disciples, feeling that that's the main model that would help. And I think out of this experience I'm getting and talking to campus ministers and everything, and where team ministry is very prevalent and so on, is another kind of notion of the church as a community of ministers, where our job becomes to orchestrate the ministerial activities of other people, where we're really trying to find out what the genuine talents of people are and to bring them out and mobilize them in one way or another. Seems like we need a lot of respect for individuals with that, and a lot of sense of knowing how to call people forth on this. Surely one of the skills we need in the future is the motivational skill on that. I know there's ways to get people involved, and other than making them feel guilty. And I think part of it is a sense of momentum in this parish. We're building, we got something worthwhile, it's a good place to be, and so on. Might as well say this right at this point, when the more of this futurology I read and so on, in the directions the society is probably going in, the more we are needed. we got the kind of skills and background and do the kinds of work that more and more the culture is interested in and needs, I think. So a community of ministers that we're trying to work out here. Let me stop there for a minute and see, what I'd like you to do at this point is turn to the person next to you and try to pin that down in a more practical way, to say, okay, what's that going to mean to me now in my parish? I mean, if I took seriously in the future the ambivalence about community that I got to continually face, and how am I going to end up responding to that? Let's do that for a couple minutes now.
What I think about it is just, we've been working on
yeah, on a small country parish.
And one of the things that
Well, I assume that. I've only been there 3 months, but I'm finding out that's not. They recognize it.
there's water
Involvement isn't necessarily acknowledged.
The White House is doing that.
Follows from that.
Some of the little groups, the old guard,
Not as much knowledge as I assumed.
and then for various subdivisions of all the rural, and what they're all asking for is allow us to.
In the back. They don't leave early. They come late.
So we also want to belong to something.
They all come together.
Yeah, and I think that they've got the impression that we've tried to uniformize everybody. Wipe out their military.
Well,
Are you aware of that?
I'm sure it's expected and
I don't know. That
but
was
they're
started
not
before I got there.
resistant to that. They're accepting that.
Good start. But I was in the group out of the White House.
And I just resurrected the target. The previous pastor was sick with cancer.
The White House, by the way,
Got a little
far out.
ways down.
Not far out radical. They're so distant.
I've been back and forth, guys, about 5 weeks.
I can see it just in terms of, I think so often we worry about people who are really
Happy about it.
you have the momentum going and
They feel accepted and that they're guys are kind of
the important things we have going on. Like how somebody disagrees with somebody kids coming down. We don't do it. We have they're just probably
That's probably better than last week I gave a talk
I did a similar thing. I basically our 4th semester. I was in a bigger yeah, the groups that were already gathered.
I guess I don't feel real bad about what you know.
The small groups.
I used to be very
Have a little more direction. With some success.
there's all kind of reasons.
Like,
And I can't run my
And take responsibility.
they give us 2 hours.
What they got to do is sometimes
Usually read something less. Require an act of government or so on.
the more you part with it,
Part of them were already appointed and part of them want to be in it, but they wanted something required, kind of their own identity. But I don't think we had very cafeteria.
But there's something about momentum. I was listening to a show on
Different circle of volunteers, the masses and schools. Yeah, grade school and high school cafeteria had masses.
Anyway, they start talking about
All of the Sacramento kind
All right, can I have your attention, please? Okay, I'd like to identify another trend, and the next 2 need to be seen in some sort of dialectical relationship, just to alert you to that fact. be a counterpoint to much of what I'm going to say in this section. But that is the trend predicted by the futurologists, and it seems obvious to anyone who looks at things, that is that the world will be increasingly pluralistic and interdependent. Well, they're predicting by the year 2000 we'll have something like 6 billion people. We got 4.6 now. Developing countries are going to increase by something like 50%. There's going to be greater immigration into the United States. We might have as many as 40 million illegal aliens by 2000. We've got about 4 to 12 million now. The world is going to be changing in terms of the economic structures. You know, they're saying we, as Ken Naisbitt tells us in Megatrends, that the more and more of the industrial base will be handled by the third world countries. We will move away from being an industrial society to being an information society. More and more products will be produced in various countries. Raw materials will be shipped from Brazil to Taiwan, where part of it's made, and then on to Japan, where more is made, and then brought to the United States to be finished and sold. That kind of interdependence will continue to grow. At the same time, pluralism will become more evident. That is, because of communications and this economic interplay, we're going to know more about cultures, people forced to come into contact with them. Business people who went to China are going to learn something about culture. Literally, in our own world, we'll begin to understand different religious traditions more because we'll be forced to do that. It'll become clearer that we dwell on this spaceship that our fate is common. Joseph Campbell, a guy about myth and symbol and so on, said when people went out in space and looked back upon the Earth and could see it, this globe out there, that forever changed the consciousness of citizens of the Earth. That picture, that ability to do that for different perspective given when we look at that globe or see those pictures from the television set, will change as our consciousness. Now, that's the kind of thing that perhaps we're not immediately aware of, but it seems to make a lot of sense to me. We probably have a radical, fundamental change here in consciousness or perception that occurs as a result of all of that. Now, to try to put that into dialogue with some theological understandings again, I borrow here from Karl Rahner in the famous article, I suppose many people are familiar with it, the one where he talks about the future of the church as in these terms. He says that the first great change in the history of the church occurred in the first century, when the church obviously moved from being a Jewish-based community to becoming a Gentile community. And that changed everything. I mean, it was a universalizing of the message, a breaking out of the mold that was formed by Judaism, the forcing of other categories, bringing in Hellenistic culture, trying to come up with the body-soul thing. It's the kind of thing that leads eventually to Aristotle's interaction with Thomas Aquinas and so on. So that he sees as the first great change in the history of the church. And he thinks now that we are at the beginning point of the second great change in the history of the church. That we are now moving from being a European American church to becoming, for the first time in the history of the world, a world church. A church that gets enculturated in various cultures. In other words, for him, the Second Vatican Council is not the end of something, but just the tiny tip of something that's beginning, where change will become so much more massive that we can hardly imagine it at this point. So the view that, of course, many people have is that Second Vatican Council capped, in a sense, many changes that were afoot, all the liturgical, scriptural movements of the 20th century and so on, and that we are in a process now of getting hold of that and stabilizing it. Rahner's position is exactly the opposite of that. That for the first time we're moving to be a world church. This is the beginning of a major movement that we can hardly imagine. From this perspective, I mean, a leader who would think that he's got to pull everything together in a way and centralize everything is simply out of tune. From the viewpoint of history, this person would then be seen as sort of the last gasp of the previous church order, rather than any kind of a future-oriented thinker. Well, that is an idea then that needs to be played with, I think, and we'll see what directions it would go in. It reminds me of that book by Vincent Donovan. What is it? Revisiting Christianity. People know that, where he dealt with the Maasai tribe, I guess is the way they say it. I mean, his bit was he went into Africa and to this Maasai tribe and simply, he tried other traditional methods, but then he simply told them the story of Jesus and allowed that to interact with their culture. And it's a fascinating thing. I've picked most of this up orally, but I guess what happened is that they began to take that seriously, and over a period of time, it transformed their culture, but their culture transformed the story as well. So that their way of living out Christianity became far different. They developed their own images of God, as the rain, I guess, became a major image for them. It transformed the way they interacted as males and females in the culture. They used to let the old people go out and die in the woods and chain them to a tree. And now they bring the people in to die within the community. Transform their culture, but on the other hand, the Christian faith looked much different too as a result. I mean, I guess their Eucharist was an all-day affair. Didn't last, it wasn't a brief kind of thing at all. Their sacramental rites took varying forms. I guess this caused a lot of consternation in official circles and so on, the need to sort of squelch that. But the point of the story is when Christianity gets enculturated on a new basis, it's going to look so different. I was listening to a guy last summer about China and what he considered to be the tremendous potential. I mean, when you get the Marxism has laid on top of the Chinese culture, in his opinion, it hasn't touched it at all. It's got to do with their deep sense of the Tao, of the yin-yang thing, complementarity of life and life. And if you begin to enculturate Christianity in China, and where there's an indigenous expression, it's going to look so different. I mean, they will read it in a different way in terms of complementarity probably, and not so much in terms of paradox as we see it, in which we tend to stress that paradoxical character of the death and the resurrection. I think a whole different theology would emerge out of that. Examples, again, perhaps, of what this means. Well, we're moving into, therefore, a change period that is going to boggle people's minds, no doubt. Skillebeck has said that if we ever had a council now, it would look so different. It would definitely be dominated by the Third World. Far different from where the American and European bishops dominated the Second Vatican Council. So just these few years later, one can imagine, I'm sure there wouldn't be another council where there wouldn't be African dancing taking place there, for example. So this attunes us here to this tremendous pluralism that we are no doubt are going to have to deal with. Certain prescriptions would follow from all of this. I mean, just to dream for a while. One of the things is there would have to be a clear renunciation of the notion of Christendom. The kind of thing that the moral majority wants to do in the United States now, to make this like a theocracy in a way, or to take their brand of Christianity and get that sort of implanted in the whole social fabric, and to dominate the discourse that in the public realm. That sort of drive for Christendom in this futurology makes no sense. One is ultimately beating one's head against the wall. One has to give up that kind of ideal. One of the things it suggests is that we learn to celebrate pluralism rather than just tolerate it. I feel, probably a lot of us in ministering, we got our own toleration points. We got our own sense of how much of this can I really go along with. We got a woman in our university parish who wants to say the rosary after Mass for Peace now. It's a question, what do you do with that in a community? Well, so we, our response was, great, George Ann, lead the rosary, see what happens. So she gets people to sign up and so on. Well, I notice more and more young people coming to say the rosary with her. The other day, a kid, very avant-garde, liberal, no traditional church, I don't think even knows that background, starting to say the rosary as he swims his laps in the morning. He's in one of these holistic spirituality health fellows, and he's into saying the rosary. Well, now, that's interesting in terms of this celebration of pluralism to me. And when it seems to me what all of us are forced back on here is, where's my toleration point? And where do I want to screen certain things out and say no to them? It seems to me as the leaders, if we're going to follow this trend, that we've got to learn to be happy with that, celebrate it. Good, Georgianne, I'm glad you got the rosary going after this Mass for our collegians here. And then obviously we spell it out in other ways that we would like to be happy there's the interaction among these various groups. One would have to say, what does it mean to have one canon law coming out now for a pluralistic church? I mean, Rahner says that in his article. He wrote it, of course, before it's going out, but he says that makes absolutely no sense. You can't have one law that governs all these different situations. Oh, it just can't be. So he would see this as a terrible anachronism that's entered our church right at this particular period in history, when we ought to be moving towards a decentralization. We clearly, as pastoral ministers and so on, need to encourage freedom and the free acceptance of the faith. This raised that whole theme about education to adulthood and getting away from the church as being a folk religion and counting on the parental generation to be able to bring the next generation into the church. They simply are going to have more options than that. There's